Hi and welcome back to Mr. Allred's 5 Minutes On. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of entrepreneurship. Now this is going to be geared towards an A-level standard of understanding. It's going to look at things like entrepreneurship and really be geared towards the Edexcel specification. If you're a GCSE student or on another specification, it might be useful, but you might want to check with teachers and those sort of things about the information that's relevant. For GCSE students, it is going to go into deeper concepts than just what an entrepreneur is and the characteristics of an entrepreneur, and therefore might be useful, but you might need to take into consideration you're not going to be tested on probably 50% of what's in this video. So let's start with what an entrepreneur is. Well, an entrepreneur are risk takers. They're people with business ideas who are willing to take a risk, and that risk that they're willing to take in is going to be monetary. It's going to be money that they're going to invest into the business. Often new businesses fail within the first 5 years, so they do run a real risk of losing money. Beyond that, they can often run the risk of losing their own personal possessions if they've got unlimited liability, their financial security, if they've already got a job that they know they're going to get money from. It can be very stressful. So there's lots and lots of risks involved in setting up their organization. However, with risk comes reward, and that reward is profit. There is massive amounts of profit to be made for a successful organization, if it can grow and it can develop. But entrepreneur is a bit deeper than just having the ability to take a risk. They're innovators. They are able to spot gaps in the market and bring together factors of production to develop a product to fulfill that need, fulfill that gap, that untapped potential demand. They're organisers. I just said they bring together the factors of production. They bring together some quantities of land, some quantities of labour, some quantities of capital to create a business, create a product, and therefore deliver a need or a want that the public want. They're decision makers. They make constant decisions. They are constantly looking at the decisions that need to be made across, in the early days of business, every facet of the organisation. So be that marketing to production to human resources to customer service. They're making constant decisions. And this leads me on to really the day-to-day life of an entrepreneur. It's going to be varied. They're going to be involved in all aspects of the business early on. They might employ people, but often they do it themselves. And often they're going to be involved in all this different decision making that's going to impact their business in one way or another. And there's some significant barriers to becoming an entrepreneur and to an entrepreneurial spirit. And it's really important for economies to foster this entrepreneurial spirit. Business and new business is really good for our economy. Not only does it provide jobs, but it adds to the overall GDP of the nation. It can eventually, if they do really well, add excess to taxes and those sort of things. So it's really important for businesses to be encouraged. But there are some barriers, and number one, the biggest one, is lack of finance. There's a risk, and often the entrepreneur doesn't have the finance themselves and goes to a bank. And if banks assess the risk as being too high, they just won't lend, they just won't give the money. And it's the same for investment, it's the same for a venture capitalist. They feel that that money is not going to come back to them, or they're not going to get a decent return on that investment. They're not going to invest. So finance can be really hard to gain, and it can be a barrier. Lack of entrepreneurial capacity can be an issue. The entrepreneur might not have all the skills that they need in order to develop that business. They might have the idea, they might be willing to take the risk. Do they have the capacity to actually run a business? Often the answer might be no, and that might result in a business failure. There can be legal barriers, lots and lots of red tape in business, lots and lots of loopholes to jump through. And is the entrepreneur willing and able to jump through these loops to build that business? There can be a fear of failure. I talked about it earlier when I talked about risk. Often if I'm setting up a business, I've already got a job, I've already established, I might have a mortgage to pay, I might have a family and all those things going on. And I might fear failure because that puts that at risk. Often in some countries we have corrupt and unsupportive business environments, not necessarily in the UK, but in other countries we have political instability, we do have corruption and bribery that takes place, and that can prevent potentially me setting up an organisation. But once the business grows, we can often miss this entrepreneurial spirit. So we have this concept that we call entrepreneurship, and this really is a culture within a corporation. It's corporate culture being developed to develop entrepreneurial skills within my employees, to give them the skills. And that's employees having those entrepreneurial spirit and being willing to make those decisions and take those risks. But often, and most probably, they're not risking their own money. And in there lies sort of the major negative. There's some massive positives to being able to develop this entrepreneurial culture, this entrepreneurship within your business. It drives innovation. If you can give this to employees to take these risks, to come up with the next big idea, well, that drives innovation, and that can give you a gap in the market, that can push competitors out, and that gives you the next big thing that might be able to sell and get you that massive reward that there is in place. It can also enable you to fulfill the self-actualization need as according to Maslow. If you think about it, running your own business does tap into self-actualization. Well, if I can do that within my organization with my employees, well, I'm tapping into what Maslow said about self-actualization, to seeing my decisions in place and seeing my overall vision shown through an organization. Well, I can do that with my employees and provide motivation for them for that. However, as I said at the beginning, the biggest negative is they're not risking their own money. That can be a problem, because are they going to be risk avert, or are they going to be happy to take as many risks as it takes to the business to be successful? There's a question to be had there. It might be an evaluation point you want to conclude in a conclusion. You need to really think about, is having this culture going to lead to the rewards, or is it just going to lead to excess risk? And there's a question to be answered there, and that's its negative. This has been Mr. Allred's 5 minutes on. Please like the video and please subscribe.